Hello and welcome back to the Crypto Chronicle Podcast. We are recording on a Thursday, not a Tuesday.
It's very weird.
Yeah, it is quite weird. We're having the 9-day intermission as opposed to the even 7, but
the extra day has helped.
The extra day has helped. Maybe if we'd gone one extra, it could have been even more interesting, but we might as well hold it. I think it's 6 a.m. tomorrow. I worked out, didn't I?
We might do a special one tomorrow then, if we feel like it.
We could. We could
just live record us sitting here trading.
Yes, for those that don't know it, the great residency of the ETF podcast. Sorry, losing my words there. There is fantastic ETF news, massive ETF news that has obviously hit the news this week. And if you are a cryptocurrency enthusiast, you wouldn't be immune to knowing that news. But that is, of course, that the SEC and essentially the US government did a 180, didn't they, on the Ethereum ETF. Not quite sure whether they're 180 on ETH being a security. We can dive into that a bit down the line when we talk on it. But essentially, that's been the huge news that has lifted the market this week, lifted Ethereum more so, but it's probably pushed Bitcoin and
it's definitely pulled them all up by a few K,
because really what it is it's just a kind of a generalized paintbrush over the industry that they're becoming more accepting of it now.
Very much, yeah.
But really, let's get stuck into it. So essentially what happened was, we all know the Bloomberg analyst, I don't know how to pronounce their last names, Seyfarth and Balchunas. I think Balchunas is right. Seyfarth.
Yeah, Balchunas.
Anyway, so the two guys on Twitter that were reporting all over the Bitcoin news. They're from Bloomberg, I believe, both of them. And essentially everyone, they're the go-to reporters that everyone gets their news from. Was it Monday or Tuesday? I think it was Monday.
Yeah.
They came out.
Yeah, late Monday night.
And essentially tweeted that the shift from denial to acceptance was a real thing. And I think, so we were talking, was it 1090? It was on Polymarket, which is where you bet on events. The approval was 10% approval, 90% non-approval. I actually looked at this myself on the weekend. So let's just say that's the retail odds of it happening. I think these guys still had 25.
Yeah, they had 25.
Obviously, you and I had been barking from the hills probably for months on end that we were in support of Larry and BlackRock, and that we weren't going against a man that was it was 596-1. I don't think he'd lost an approval for 2 decades or something. So Larry was putting a lot on the line, and we put all of our eggs in his basket.
I loved it. Like every time you went on Twitter, everyone's like, Larry's going to be 50, whatever it is, and 2. And I was like, oh God, everyone's loving it. But, you know, they've essentially just pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, which is kind of funny. But
well, it is. And I want to just quickly assert, we're not doing victory laps yet. It still does have to be approved. Mind you, there's a small victory lap, please. There's a small chance that it doesn't, which would require a 180 over 180, which is a 360, which would be horrific.
Hey, we were literally saying that they've pulled the wool over and they wanted to buy big ETH cheaper. They could be just wrecking everyone now.
Exactly. It could be one of Gary's finest moves against us. Imagine that. He gave us Bitcoin and now he's just doing this to us with ETH. But essentially, to kind of, I won't go off the articles because we can just generally discuss it. Essentially what happened is it's been a number of moves across, I'd say, a 2-week period, hasn't it? So, or a couple of months. We'll go back. So firstly, all the applications happened. And then the biggest fork in the road for this was them classifying ETH as a security, right? Yeah. Or them wanting to take the ETH Foundation to the courts of law and get ETH determined as a security. Or obviously the big difference here between Bitcoin and Ethereum is Bitcoin is considered a commodity by the SEC, whereas ETH is considered a security. Now they had this view, so essentially we made comments last week and the week before, and we were kind of getting hawkish on the idea, and we was kind of saying that it's unlikely to get approved. It was because of the SEC's willingness to respond to them, to hold meetings, make those comments.
That was it. There was just nothing. It was ghost silence.
So. But it wasn't the Bloomberg reporter's fault, so it wasn't our fault. It wasn't anyone else's fault, for not thinking that they literally have to respond to these things for it to get approved.
But then I want to know, so there's the issue that I have, right? Because after I think it was yesterday, the other day before, was it? I can't remember. I think it was a BlackRock. They redid their filing to exclude staking or whoever it was.
It was to remove staking.
Yeah, that's it. So where did the direction from that come from?
Yeah, well, I think so. This is the sticking point here with the security. So obviously when they're applying the Howey test or whatever, they're trying to prove that there's a promise of income earning, right? So with staking, there is that, isn't
True,
there? It's
yeah.
saying if you stake, so essentially the way I've seen it, or the way most people have seen it is, what they've done is they've gone, so the way for the SEC to save face and still look good throughout all of this is for them to go, no worries, have your ETF approval.
For being a security.
No, but you can have your ETF approval without staking. But we're still taking you to court for your staked ETF, which is earning yield, which is a security. So that's their way. Do you know what I mean? So they're going, we'll give you what you want, but we're still going to win in court over it being a security because you're staking it and you're earning income on it, et cetera, et cetera. So the way they said is they asked them to remove that aspect. ARC 21, so I think it was Kathy Wood and maybe Van Eck who had the staking, the staking functions. They've asked them to remove them. They've gone back. They've removed it. They've then resubmitted. So now it's about getting those approved. So, look, it would be spectacular, wouldn't it, if they went back and then they rejected them? It doesn't seem likely or make much sense. Something that you obviously, and the reason why I say be aware of it and not think that it won't happen is because no one thought this would happen. So I'm saying there was pretty much next to no chance of the 180 that's occurred. There's now next to no chance of the next 180 occurring, but there still is that chance. Going back to what I was talking about though, this all started with Donald Trump, didn't it? So essentially, it was probably 2 weeks ago. We were discussing how he was introducing crypto donations. He kind of was in that silly video going, Sleepy Joe's, if you want crypto, don't vote for Sleepy Joe, vote for Trump, and blah, blah. And anyways, it was becoming apparent, wasn't it? That he was using this as a political weapon. I think in the past he said, Bitcoin scammy and blah, blah, blah. We've obviously spoken on the podcast a few times about him releasing his ETH NFTs. Those NFT market collections on the Ethereum blockchain. Really, it started with him. And what was probably apparent over the 2 weeks to the Biden administration, whom, obviously control the SEC, and Gary, is that, these younger voters, these Zoomer voters, we're going to lose millions of votes here. If all they care about is Bitcoin and crypto, and which is, what a lot of young people would, we're going to lose a lot of votes.
And that's only growing as well. When you look at the statistics, it's massive. The adoption is huge.
Well, the way they would have seen it is it's not just this election thing. We've got to, for decades to come.
Exactly,
And if we're remembered as the bad guys on this issue, that loses a lot of voting power, doesn't it? So
very much.
It's been weaponized kind of politically. And so that really
Shock
was...
horror. Shock horror.
Shock horror, yeah. And that really was kind of the spur of this whole thing, wasn't it? So it was really them kind of realizing, well, if he's going to get votes through this, we need to probably tame our stance. And it kind of started very specifically this morning, with that bill being passed and being approved. Now, I'm not talking about the SEC crypto accounting policy, which was the SAB 121, but I was talking about the FIT or FIT 21 crypto bill, which had bipartisan backing. Now, not majority of Dems voted yes on it, but a lot of them did. But really there was bipartisan support where both the bill was supported by both 71 Democrats and 208 Republicans. And essentially what it is it's kind of that bill's there to foster that innovation, to ensure that the right regulation is in place for digital assets, so on and so forth, which has pretty much been the sticking issue that we've talked about in Australia. And then in America as well. So two bombshells really from the US regulation side and the SEC side is they're favourable towards Ethereum now and somewhat altcoins, I guess, and then legislation and regulation around crypto. It's really bizarre, and I kind of messaged into the Trading Academy this morning, didn't I? Or I think it was yesterday, and I said it's just this weird feeling that hasn't sunk in with me yet that the government's now accepting crypto. The banks are now accepting crypto.
It's weird.
So our two final bosses, or our biggest bosses, we've now somewhat defeated. And I just don't understand how you can't get more bullish from that. I feel like over the years it's just going to be a speculative bubble because we always need banks and banks won't accept it. And okay, well, all right, well, if the banks do, the government won't. Now it's like, all right, well, both do. You've got Wells Fargo, JP Morgan adding BlackRock, Bitcoin ETFs to their balance sheet. You've got the US government in maybe 16 hours time approving a spot Ether ETF. I'm struggling where to be bearish, and it's a worry to me slightly, but at the same time,
I was going to say, this usually gives me the ick because it's like, well, if no one's bearish, someone should be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of, that crypto saying, the opposite always happens of the herd. But, it's important to talk about how this move was so vicious in sidelining so many people, not just from an F perspective, but you've got to remember that what we spoke about last week and actually the week before, we're talking about how that sentiment feeling in the market.
Yeah.
I had a really good conversation with Clint about this last week. It was actually a phone call, and it was probably on the Tuesday. Actually, it was on the Wednesday, so the day after we had the podcast.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if I spoke about this on last week's podcast, but I was telling him, me and you definitely had this conversation. I just don't remember if it was on the podcast about it, feeling like 25K in October.
Yeah.
And I was saying to him...
It was in the office, yeah.
Yeah, it was in the office. And I was saying to both you and him, I was just saying, it's just so similar where we're at high time frame support. So it's where most are naturally bearish, but all these fundamental events are happening. The sentiment is so bad. The charts continue to say we're only heading up. And so I just said, it's very weird that we've got this feeling here when everything is bullish, and, in a click of the fingers, it could all be erased. And it was so funny going into this weekend with that feeling and having that conversation with you, having that conversation with Clint. Obviously, in the investments channels in Trading Academy, I really put to detail about how the low to medium time frame noise meant nothing, and how I was so steadfast and bullish on us seeing higher regardless. And, to see it kind of all come together then a week later is crazy, isn't it? I even made that very, very specific comment. Just one day of price action in a bull market can reverse 3 months.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
You watched ETH grind down from 3,800 to 2,800 across from start of March. So
2.5 months. Yeah.
So two and a bit months. One day, one candle. One candle on ETH added the entire market cap of Solana to its market cap and erased 2 months of downtrend. That is what a bull market is. So you're going to get down in the dumps because price might trade sideways or like this and then this and then this for a couple of months. One day is all it needs, the bull market, to erase every single feeling you had for 2 months and remind you about the state of the market that we're in. Because it's the same in bear markets, isn't it? You can grind upwards. We've had that feeling, didn't we, where we would, let's just say, we're finally past 20K and we've gotten to 22K and it's just like a death candle to 19K, and it's like, we worked so hard to get above 20K and just one day in the bear market ruined it. But
it was it was funny. I was looking at it from, it was probably like the end of last week, similar to the conversation we had where it's like, God, it just everything feels so negative. As much as everything looked really positive, it feels negative. Yeah. I was looking at the Bitcoin Glassnode stuff and looking at obviously the rate of return versus long-term versus short-term holders. Yeah. Everyone got rinsed. It was short-term. No one long-term. Yeah. Anyone who bought it pre-60 was just chilling. Anyone that's bought it 68, 65...
And me and you speak about this often, don't we? Just because obviously, the real health and strength of Bitcoin is through 90% of people hodling and 90% of people refusing to sell to the other 10% that fight over it. And that's the hilarious thing that most people don't know about Bitcoin is they think it's all people like me and you trading Bitcoin, our spot Bitcoin and exchanging. Me and you don't touch our spot Bitcoin. 90% of people don't touch their spot Bitcoin. No. All the price action you see throughout the day is through 10% of the Bitcoin. So the other 90% of Bitcoin spiders move. And it hasn't.
Which even in the last 2 months or the last month and a half since post halving, it was funny. The most revenue that consistently comes from Bitcoin onto market is from mining, right? Miners obviously liquidating. Yeah. That's dropped by 65%. So miners are damn well not selling anything right now. Yeah. So can't have more bullish sentiment than that, really. No. They know what it's going to be worth.
Yeah. Alrighty. So we had a good chat then about the ETF stuff, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Look, we can go through a bit more fundamental news. Wisconsin State, so the state of Wisconsin Investment Board revealed that they put $164 million into BlackRock and Grayscale Bitcoin ETFs. Once again, this is just another example of what I was talking about before.
When did the super funds get involved?
Yeah, well, soon. Yeah. And I mentioned before, governments are accepting, banks are accepting. This is a state of a Wisconsin Investment Board. This is a state of America investing in Bitcoin themselves.
Oh God.
And as I said, notable banks like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan are adding it to their balance sheets. And we talk hilariously about Jamie Dillon, the CEO, how he comes on, but yet his bank is literally adding it. His bank, He is the CEO of the bank. Is adding to the balance sheet. So they pull the wool over your eyes, the elites, but only for so long. Vitalik has suggested a major revamp of Ethereum's gas model. I'll include the article in there. Obviously, the big issue for ETH, tech-wise, was its move to proof of stake for scalability purposes. People just assumed this would fix gas. It was never to fix gas.
No.
It was there for cost reduction and scalability, but not for gas fee reduction, which people fell in the trap for.
If they're able to lower it by a considerable margin, let's just say 50%.
Yeah.
Where do you see it? How much that would be?
I don't know. Well, I think this is his new EIP 7706 proposal. So this is a whole new gas model. So incurs fees. It's something to do with call data and call data costs. So it aims to lower expenses for data-heavy transactions, provide independent cost management. So I'll put the article with a bit more detail into the written chronicle, but just kind of hopefully another bullish thing for ETH, even though it doesn't really require it right now. But obviously, even on the gas kind of topic, that's what the L2 is there for. Chainlink concluded its pilot to accelerate its fund tokenization with JP Morgan, Templeton, and BNY Mellon. So the DTCC, in collaboration with the Oracle blockchain Chainlink, concluded a pilot to hasten fund tokenization. So the named Smart NAV, the project aimed to standardize net asset value data distribution across blockchains. I often speak to people about Chainlink and they ask me about it. And I think, non-financial advice, of course, but I actually think the easiest altcoin that you can have conviction in is Chainlink.
Yeah.
The reason why is because every single project in this ecosystem almost requires it first and foremost. So it's always going to be there. That's the first tick. You always know it's going to be there. It's not going to be an alt that goes through cycles and you're worried that the dyno tech, it's not that.
Yeah.
B, it's institutional involvement in the traditional finance world. So you're not just hinging on the worry of, what if we never make it out into the real world with this tech?
Yeah.
Their tech is being used by JP Morgan, Templeton, DTCC. It's literally being used.
I mean, ANZ's already using it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're setting out what XRP set out to do and they're achieving that.
And not being sued.
Yeah, exactly. And it's gone past its 2017 AF, more importantly.
Yeah, too. 2017. Wow, long time, isn't it?
And the good thing about Chainlink is it constantly adds value the more it goes on. So, I would say if you're a beginner out there and, you've got Bitcoin and you've dived into Ethereum now and you're like, okay, well, what's the next project I can reach out and read on and understand the importance is, definitely go and read on Chainlink, read about its origins, read about what oracles are, what their purpose serve, and then read about what it's doing in the real world, not just amongst us, but with real banks, real institutions. Contact Duncan Wilson from CoinStash if you want a really good explanation. He'll give you a fine one on Chainlink. He's the number one Chainlink.
He's a Link maxi.
Wait until I show you this man and Link. He is
two best friends, Link and Dunk.
Dunk. We'll have to get Duncan on to talk about Chainlink once. Maybe when it breaks 100 billion market cap. Maybe I'll make that.
I'll talk about Chainlink all day if it does that.
I'll do a weekly podcast with you.
Welcome back to the Chainlink podcast.
Gaming's what I was going to do. Obviously, last week we did meme coins. I spoke about 3 blue chip meme coins. I was going to do gaming this week until everything happened. So I will do gaming next week, or maybe when things clear up. I'll talk about gaming as a narrative, just like I talked about memes, the importance of it, where I think it's going. I'll maybe give 3 blue chips. So stay tuned for that next week. But the good thing about recent months, well, not good thing, but the bad thing about recent months was we obviously saw a lot of real utility industries die, namely, I would say AI and gaming.
Correct,
where towards the end of last year when we were rallying, that was the two very obvious and big ones where all the money was going. Then we stalled at ETFs, pulled back, pushed more, and then it was memes, wasn't it? All liquidity went to memes, not AI, not gaming. I believe whilst memes are important, and I think we will see once we're in an alt season actually go flow back into the real utility, hopefully. And that's where blockchain gaming's a huge one. And I started seeing this last month. There was almost nearly 1 billion, the highest since January 21, putting into blockchain gaming. So blockchain gaming investments. which is huge. And there was 2.9 million daily unique active wallets. So both records. So you can say now, it's kind of at the highest peak of interest it's had.
Have you seen that game? I apologize that I forgot the name of what it was. There's this game that just launched, and it's like they had 300,000 people register for the pre-release, and it's like a 2-week campaign competition.
Gotcha.
$5 million prize pool, and you go in like a group of 2, and you have to like try and win all these things, and you get ranked against each other. Yeah, literally. I was like looking at it, and I was like, oh, it's literally like Call of Duty.
Yeah.
But like monetized.
Oh, don't tell Cal.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, God, no, Cal, I'm not talking about it. I have to find it. I forgot the name of it, but I was like, whoa, this is what we've been talking about for the last 2 years for gaming, right? And
I guess it's kind of a frustrating thing about gaming is it's like, the utilities there. It's a similar thing with AI now. Just because it's such early days, as that it's the right industry for blockchain, and you know how 100%. Impactful it can be. It's just that 99% of what you see is vaporware, and that we haven't put it into practice yet. So it's awesome that we finally see something like this. Like, this is what it's supposed to be about. And I think that'll ramp up this year.
I think definitely.
I think obviously it was all speculation last time. It was just like, oh, let's put gaming and the web blockchain together and let's create these projects.
But it's funny because like everyone, particularly when it comes to like gaming and like obviously crypto's really fast. Gaming is not that fast.
Yeah.
People don't realize that creating a game takes months, if not years, particularly if you're doing it from scratch. 100%. Call of Duty goes out and goes, we're going to start doing, some form of blockchain, whether it be tokenization, this. It's probably going to take a year or 2. If you're doing it from scratch, you're talking 5.
Yeah.
Like Illuvium, that's been around since 2017 and it's not even fully launched yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a long time.
Heaps of them. So really good to see investment coming back into there. As noted, we'll do that in the next week or 2 and we'll have a big discussion on gaming. We'll move on to technical analysis quickly. I think we pretty much discussed a lot of it, but I will just run through the last 9 days, not 7 days. But effectively the SEC's 180. Well, it was kind of, the way I see it was, price action to me was always going to play out like this. You probably heard me say, after the fact narratives, and, you might say, you just say, well, I was saying a week or 2 ago that we were heading higher, eventually, regardless. It didn't matter to me what the news was. And now that the news has come, great, we have done it. But really it was 3 news events into one another. It was CPI. We got easing CPI, remember?
Yeah.
That was after last week's podcast. So on last week's podcast, we were talking about how we'll go up to that next level of probably 64, 65K if we get good CPI.
And what did we do?
We got there. And then it was just about whether we could rally from there.
Yeah.
We obviously didn't know what news was ahead of us, but we consolidated at that 65, 66 level, didn't we? We were there for 65, 66 for a little bit. And then what happened was, we went into the weekend, we're at the 67, we're at the range POC, the range GP. I believe I've showed these in the Chronicle, which I said was our greatest resistance pretty much before here to all-time highs. It was pretty much a weekend battle, wasn't it? It was like from Friday to
up, down, up, down,
it was literally just like, you'd hit 60. It was like almost like every day I was looking at the daily close, it was like 67,000 flat. And then it was
I was literally trying to trade it almost. I kept looking at it over the weekend and I'm like, oh, it's 67. And as I look back like 2 hours later, I was like, it's 65. What is going on here? So it's just that chop,
So we had that chop and we reached there. And then, so we had CPI, got our first boost. Next boost was Trump-ish, political kind of blah, 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 blah. Let's say we got to 67. We're rejecting from there locally, and then ETH ETF 67, 72. We've now pulled back to pretty much mid 69s. We've been touching kind of that prior 2021 all-time high, haven't we? And we're just trading around that, which hopefully this is kind of that true, real monthly. I'll show the monthly chart, and it's a really good chart to look at. Really clean, zoomed out chart, which just shows you it's almost like a monthly retest of the prior all-time highs. You look at it, we burst through it with one candle. Last month we had the red death candle that's retested it. May's gone green all the way back up. Hopefully June, July, and it just looks like this perfect SR flip on the monthly. But, in essence, price was 61,000 when we were talking to you guys last week. It was 72,000 as much as 2 days ago.
I like it when there's a 7 in front of it. It's a really nice number.
Having a 7.
Having a 7's great.
Oh, yeah. So essentially, pretty much right now, his price is kind of just crabbing sideways, isn't it? Probably awaiting until tomorrow morning, which I believe it's 6 a.m. roughly when they should make a decision.
I look forward to waking up.
I'll be waking up. I'll probably be awake on bloody night, knowing me. But obviously the important price action hasn't been Bitcoin, but I will just say resistance is that 886. I'll show this in the written chronicle if you want to take a look at it. We've got one more weekly candle high and then all-time highs. Really the only resistance, true resistance to me right now if we do rally, is all-time highs. But obviously the important price action has mainly been with Ethereum. As I said, Ethereum in one single day rose, I think, $590, which was $70 billion in market share, which was all of Solana's market cap in one.
It's just crazy.
It's just funny. You always go on the people in the Twitter world always know how, people from Solana and Ethereum fight because they're all fighting for the king of DeFi. And it's hilarious when Ethereum just, does nothing for a few months and just adds your whole market capitalization in one day. Literally. It's pretty funny. So Sol got a bit little broed there by the big bro. But
go on. Yeah. She went down to 125 and she's back up at 180. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah. Well, Sol's been extremely strong.
Yeah.
So essentially what happened, and I'll show this technically in the written chronicle, I'll include it all, was ETH was at a 3-year uptrend, but a 1.5-year downtrend. But over the long-term time horizon, it literally cleanly tapped this 3-year trend line. Ever since you've seen FBTC rally like it's been going out of fashion. And now it's looking to break that 1.5-year downtrend, probably on this approval if it gets approved is my best guess. On ETH, it's the same kind of resistance we had that we dropped from in March. So it's 4K kind of on the dot, $4,100, which is the 786. And a few unswept daily candles. As a result, of ETH BTC rising so much, and ETH rising is Bitcoin dominance has obviously come down, I think 2% to 56 to 54. That'll probably just come lower. If we get approved and ETH really, really goes for it, and we're really seeing
you reckon it'll come from BTC or it'll come from stables?
I think it'll come. I think there's a lot of people sideline retail. It's really hard to make a call, and what's really important to understand right now is what smart money may be thinking. I want to remind everyone that we had, $25 billion of Bitcoin dumped on us by Grayscale, converting their fund to an ETF. They have the same thing here with ETH. They've got 10 billion in ETH. So I think what my thinking is why we might see a lot more sell pressure or a lot more damage done to Ethereum than Bitcoin in terms of Grayscale is we neutralize that every day with such great BTC inflows in BlackRock, VanEck.
And there's larger quantity, whereas...
Well, what I was going to say as well is given it's a commodity, given its nature, given it's not being taken to court, I just... my very safe assumption is that Bitcoin to an institutional investor is a lot more favourable. A lot more safer. So... every day they were just throwing money at Bitcoin and we were neutralizing Grayscale dumping theirs for profits because of that.
Just chewing it.
My point here is that Grayscale's going to dump no matter what because that's profit taking, the premium, switching to other funds, whatever it is. But is there going to be the same amount of demand? Demand on the other side like there was Bitcoin? I think
you're right.
So I think whilst it may be neutralized for a while, it just might not be done as well. You got to remember that even though Grayscale was dumping this from January 10 to whatever, we went from 38,000 to 74,000. So we can still do the same with ETH. It's just, could be slower, could be a bit harder, could be a bit more of a grind. But anyways, I think it's best we wait till tomorrow. Because we get to tomorrow,
you're going to make me stay up now.
Well, they could reject it, and Bitcoin's back at 60,000, and we're repeating last week's podcast. So let's just wait. I think it's best to wait.
Welcome back to another ETF.
And the mining world. Let's move on to that quickly before we conclude.
Mining. In all honesty, everything's very, very similar to what it was last week. To be honest, obviously Bitcoin at the moment it's just ticking along as per usual. We're obviously seeing probably the worst patch of transaction fees. And that's really honestly on the back of what I said earlier about miners not wanting to sell. At the moment, transactions are very stable. However, the fees and amounts of them are obviously quite a lot less, which is therefore causing the fees to drop. So at the moment, it's a bit average on that, but then again, not necessarily something we haven't expected 2 to 3 months post-halving. So it's all sticking to plan. Altcoins, all very similar. Everyone's in a holding pattern. This is usually the period where it's older generation machines for alts. If you take out Casper, for example, as a new network, everything else is tech that's been out for 12 to 24 months. So we're starting to see, obviously, new machines coming out in the next 6 to 12 months. Usually that's sort of synonymous with the bull run. The new L9s for Light and Doge, but you're not available just yet. So at the moment, there's not a huge amount to report. Casper is still doing what it always does, which is continuously rise in difficulty, as well as the 1/12 emission drop every month. So yeah, she's not really that favoured to mining, I won't lie. It's been a bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
However, the price of it should eventually rise, which is, the golden goal for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's kind of somewhat cyclical, unfair thing of Casper is that, like, obviously on the way up, you enjoyed such huge appreciation in price, and ever since price has tanked,
exactly,
it's changed the landscape of it.
Very much.
Just on Casper, it has pulled back as much as 50% probably right now. I would expect in an alt season that it does go beyond that.
It does seem to do really well with ETH. That's something that I've noticed is that, like, when ETH over the last sort of 2 months, it's pulled back right with it. Whereas ETH pumped the other day, it's gone up quite considerably in the last day or two. So
actually more like an altcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, half an hour on the dot, that is. Thank you everyone for listening in. Obviously tomorrow's the big decision. We'll be back with the podcast in 4 days on Tuesday to dissect all of that, maybe even tomorrow if we decide to do that. Fingers crossed that Larry and the boys come through for us. We were always supporters of yours, Larry, from day one. You can go back to any podcast and see that.
Do it for me, Larry.
Do it for us, Larry.
Yeah.
Let's
come
go,
on.
Larry. Max bid. Alrighty, thanks guys. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Or tomorrow.